Implementing big changes at your church can be difficult, but sometimes big changes are necessary to get where you want to be. We recently went through a huge change in the way that we communicated our church, and we learned a ton of things along the way. Today, we're going to talk about what those things are and how you can communicate the value of change to leadership and your congregation. Welcome to Blackbar. That took 20 minutes. We just recorded this whole video. We just did the whole video, and we forgot to hit record. So, take two. It's the first take as far as you know. We wanted to get out from behind the desk because I want to make sure that the stuff that we're talking about today isn't communicated as law. We are not in any way saying that if you take exactly what we did and implement it at your church, that you're going to expect the same results. You know, churches are different organizationally, from a culture perspective, and it's hard to make that sort of kind of direct one-to-one comparisons. That being said, I do think that we learned a lot of really important things, and I think that you can take those values, those ideas, and bring them to your church in a way that will work for you and your congregation. So earlier last year, our department sat down and really got to thinking about the type of communication methods that we use. Which ones were effective, which ones were not, and which ones were the best use of our time, really. We use church bulletin, we use flyers, we use social media, we use video promos, occasionally we'll use email, all sorts of different ways of getting a hold of the people in our congregation to let them know about events and whatnot. But we know that there was one particular method of communication that was a huge time sink, a huge money sink, and that nobody was paying attention to. That was our church bulletin. Like most churches, we did a monthly bulletin with upcoming events and services and details for every single ministry, as well as new visitors and guests. And it was just a trifold stuffed with so much information. Nobody wanted to read it. Most of them ended up in the pews or in the trash after service. And when we're spending, we did the math, almost $2,500 a month on print materials and over 60 hours a month of designing it and proofing it and printing it, that's a frustrating sight. I was out for blood. I wanted to kill the bulletin, but I knew that if I just brought it to the executive leadership team and says, I don't think this is worth our time, it's a waste of resources, and I didn't have data or a alternative, better solution in mind, it wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to go through. We needed to be prepared. We needed to be researched. We needed to be level-headed in order to be able to get a giant push like that through. So we did our research. The biggest stat that we found is really the change in how church attenders are classified. 20 years ago, the average church attender attended once a week for the most part. These days, the average church attender is attending once every 4 to 6 weeks. That's the reality of where we are right now. And if we hand out a bulletin once every month, we're only hitting 20 to 25% of our entire congregation. And that is a lot of time and energy to put in something that's only hitting a quarter or a fifth of our people. In addition, we wanted to see how people felt about the bulletin or flyers or our social media communication, everything. We wanted to see where people do like hearing from us. So we did a survey. The survey was pretty short. We only asked 2 questions. We did it on Sunday and asked over 75 people these 2 questions. Number 1, of this list of communication methods, what are the top 2 most effective, most important, most relevant to you? Which 2 are you most likely to read and pay attention to and not throw away or drag into the trash? Second, of this list of ministries, which are the 2 most relevant to you again? If you're a parent, are you interested in the kids or the youth ministries? If you're a man, are you interested in men's ministry? If you're older, are you interested in the seniors ministry? And with these 2 data points together, we were able to figure out on a per demographic, on a per ministry basis, which communication methods were the most effective. We knew that youth ministry wasn't going to communicate in the same way that men's ministry was, the same way that adults ministry was, that senior ministry was, right? However, we were wrong. If you look at the top 3 communication methods that we got from every single ministry, you'll notice a very clear pattern emerging. Almost unanimously, outside of the seniors ministry, the number one most requested communication method was text messaging / push notifications. This was a shock to nearly everyone in our department. I don't like push notifications. I don't like it when people text me personally. It's not my thing. But I am not my target demographic. They wanted push notifications. They wanted texting. We gotta do it. In addition to that, if you look at all of the answers we got, 82% of them were digital responses. That includes the seniors ministry that we talk to. The way that the world communicates has significantly changed over the past decade or two. And our church, along with many others, was really stuck where it was for a long time. And I think this data proved more than anything, it was time for a change. So looking at what people were asking for, push notifications and texting, we really didn't have an awesome way to do that at the moment, or so we thought. You know, we had a church app that we were using that was created by Subsplash, one of the big players in the field. And you know, our church app, and I would say most church apps, are just harder to use versions of our church website. But Subsplash had been really hard at work behind the scenes implementing a lot of really cool, important features that we just weren't aware of. The most important of which are targeted push notification groups. As soon as I read it, I knew that this was going to be the feature that changed the way that we communicate. I should put a disclaimer. This video is not sponsored by Subsplash, but future ones could be. Hit us up. The church app through Subsplash allows us to set up notification groups, one for kids ministry and youth ministry and women's ministry and seniors ministry. And it allows individual congregants to sign up for only the ministries that they care about. This cuts down on the noise by nearly 100% on every congregant. They're only going to get notified about the stuff that they care about and none of the stuff that they don't. In addition, they do have some systems in place to do geo-targeted, location-specific notifications, although we're still playing around with that tech. Although at that point we hadn't been pushing the app for a long time. We had the app for many years, and over the course of however long we had it, people had been slowly downloading it and signing up for push notifications, even though we really hadn't been pushing it nearly anywhere. And when we finally dug into the system to find out how many people had the app and how many people had notifications turned on, we found out that 6,700 people had the app installed and were asking for push notifications. In comparison, when we printed our bulletin, we printed 1,200 copies. That means in order to reach the same amount of people that we could with a push notification that takes 30 seconds to do, we would have to create and proof and print the bulletin for 5 months. That is effectiveness. That is efficiency if I've ever heard it. So now we have everything we need. We have the problem to present, we have the data to back up what we found, and we have a solution to implement. It was time to make the presentation to our executive leadership team. As I was preparing for the presentation, there were 3 really important pieces that I wanted to keep in mind as I was delivering it. First, I wanted to make the presentation in context with our mission as a church. For us, that is bringing people to Christ and equipping them to be like Him. When I talked about implementing the app and getting rid of the bulletin, I wasn't doing it to save me a bunch of time or so that my job will be easier or even that we would just save money. The main selling point for the app when I pitched it was that it would allow us to spend more time reaching people outside of the church, effectively bringing people to Christ. Of course, I have my own goals. Of course, our department has our own goals. But if you can't communicate what you're trying to change through the lens of the vision of the church, it's going to be really hard for leadership to understand the value of what you're talking about.
Another thing to think about is if your goal isn't in line with what the church vision is, you really need to check your own motives, because you could be just asking for change because you want to see change.
Right.
If your goal is to update your cameras, you may have kind of gear envy and just want new gear.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with a new camera upgrade, but if it isn't going to help your church do what your church is built to do, you're burning money. The second thing I kept in mind when I was presenting was that I wasn't presenting based on how I felt or my emotions. I was presenting on facts and data. Everybody has an opinion, but data is concrete, it's important, it's undeniable. When I presented the average trends of attendance going from 1 week to 4 to 6 weeks, when I presented the results of our survey showing that people were asking for digital forms of communication, that stuff spoke volumes more than any sort of wishy-washy idea of a future that I could have communicated without it. It helped our executive leadership team understand that the presentation that we were doing were based on real-world knowledge and facts that were to be trusted. The last thing that it was important for me, and I think it's important for everybody, is to come ready to compromise and to be flexible. Of course, when it comes to Grand Rapids First, I'm the communication guy. I'm the marketing guy. That's what they hired me for. But I don't know everything else going on in the church. There are other goals. There are other ministries that have other stuff happening. And that's why executive leadership team is there, to keep all of those balls moving and to make decisions based on the context of where we are from an overhead perspective. That meant presenting a couple different options. We looked into what it would cost to do our own app with everything that we wanted to. Subsplash had additional packages and features that we could add onto if we wanted to invest in that direction. Or we can go a more conservative route and pull back our plan a little bit if we wanted to take it safe. But giving your leadership options helps free them up to take what you're doing and put it within the context of where we're moving as a church more freely. And in the end, it worked. We put together a giant advertising campaign to communicate the change to our congregation. We had a verbal announcement from the pulpit. We had multiple different videos explaining the value of the app. We put out social media ads. We printed out one last bulletin that looked like a normal bulletin on the outside, but when you opened it up, it was just a giant full-page advertisement with the app that said, "Welcome to your new church bulletin" on the inside. It was an awesome send-off. That stupid piece of paper. And within the first week of pushing it, we had over 1,100 people signed up for custom push notifications. If that's not a win, I don't know what is. As of recording this video, we don't have all the kinks figured out. We're still working on the app. We're still figuring out how to implement it in every single ministry, but where we are is way better than where we were, and that's the most important part. So we saw a problem, we researched it, we did the survey, we presented the executive leadership team in a way that they would understand, that they would see the value in it, and the change was implemented. Pushing these kinds of monumental, mountain-shifting changes through can be incredibly intimidating, especially even if you're volunteering at a church. But if you could figure out how to communicate to your leadership in a way that they understand, in a way that they appreciate, you can move mountains. Again, in no way am I saying that every church should go out and replace their bulletin with a church app. I strongly believe that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution for every church. But I do think it is worth looking at the way that you communicate, where you're spending your time, and maybe look at if there's a better place you could be putting it.
And another thing that we should let them know is it's taking years of us being able to work with our leadership and staff to kind of get them and us on the same page of them trusting us with these ideas.
For sure.
So it's not something that just kind of happened overnight. It's been the buildup of trust so that they trust our opinions when we bring them these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can't necessarily walk into a church and brand new and expect that the leadership is going to hear you out for everything you say. It means being faithful consistently in all of the small things and continuing to present new good ideas. And eventually, when that new big idea is ready to come, they'll be ready to listen to you. So that's our story of how we killed our bulletin and implemented the app. I hope it was valuable. I hope it can help you in the sort of stuff that you're looking to implement in the future. And usually I script these outros, and I don't have one this time.
That could be it.
See you next week. There we go. We'll use that.
I like it.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of Blackbar. Be sure to check out the podcast. In addition, make sure you check out our Discord. We really want it to be an encouraging community of people to connect and help each other grow. Be sure to like and subscribe to the video, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll see you next week.